that Rare Disease Day was extra special for our rare disease community because it signified a decision was made yesterday by FDA that our Friedreich's ataxia community had its first ever product approved yesterday. And for those of you who were with some of our friends in the Friedreich's ataxia community yesterday at NIH, that announcement came late in the day yesterday, and if you saw Ron yesterday at NIH, you saw him pacing around and refreshing his email and his phone calls frequently throughout the day, because yesterday was the decision date. It's called a PDUFA date, or the target date by which FDA was expected to make a decision. So it was a really highly anticipated decision. But it's a very significant approval for a number of reasons. So what we thought was we would just take a few minutes, not that long, but just a few minutes to talk about why this approval, all approvals in rare, are very significant. So that's the first thing. But this approval is a little bit different than other approvals have been in rare. And because any milestone in achievement for one community is an achievement for all communities, and they are things that we hope all of us will someday achieve, and we want to all learn from our Friedreich's community, we thought we would take an opportunity, since we have Ron, who is the founder of the Friedreich's Ataxia Research Alliance, and he and his team have worked with the Friedreich's community to help make what happened yesterday possible. We wanted to take a moment to just dig into it a little bit and understand how yesterday happened. And then I know there are some people here with us who are members of the Friedreich's community, and so if you haven't had time to talk to Ron about what happens next, please find him afterwards, because I know people have some questions about what access looks like and what happens now. So I'm just going to turn it over to Ron to start to share with us. We're not going to take a lot of time because we know we have really some other important sessions to get to, but we wanted to take a few minutes to share. Full disclosure, Ron and I go in the Wayback Machine together, and so we wanted to just spend a few minutes together on this.
Okay. Well, thank you, Annie. Thank you again for this opportunity. Hardly know where to start, except maybe at the beginning, and that was that, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, there's nothing we've been able to achieve in the last 25 years more important to us and to our industry partners and to the FDA and to other rare diseases than our natural history database. That has been so empowering and is really the driving force behind this decision that was made yesterday, and I'll explain why. And again, don't get intimidated, get started. You know, we started like everybody else in this room. We started a natural history database very small and very inexpensively. We assembled 14 patients over a full day at the NIH to be examined by 10 clinicians in our community. And they used just a normal neurological exam and several other performance measures that we borrowed from other disease groups. We collected all those data. 18 months later, without any intervention, because we didn't have any intervention, we assembled as many of those same patients as we could. We got a dozen of the 14, the same 10 clinicians, examined the same 10 patients in the same way. The data from that day became the Friedreich's Ataxia rating scale, you know, because what we did is, okay, here are the parts of that exam that were most sensitive to change across 18 months without intervention. So let's recruit 5 clinical sites to call in as many FA patients as they can get to examine them in the same ways. The data we collect will become our Friedreich's Ataxia rating scale.
So can I just pause you for a second? So for those who aren't familiar with all of the terms, natural history studies, and Megan was talking about this earlier, are really disease progression studies.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So we're just measuring how individuals with a specific rare disease are progressing over a timeline.
And it's not like we knew in advance, oh, we need a natural history database. We set out to try to find endpoints, to try to find clinical outcome measures by doing these examinations. We started having that data flow in. People who knew what they were doing saw those data and said, This is beginning to look like natural history data to show the progression of these patients across that 18 months and across the next 18 years of their lives. That began to create a natural history database of all that progression that now has almost 1,400 of our patients, and has been used by all of the industry partners that have conducted clinical trials, used it to design their clinical trials, to decide what tissues they want to target, what symptoms they want to target, which subjects they should recruit, and which drug in their inventory they want to use in our disease. It's been a phenomenal asset for them. They tend to say, FARA has a turnkey operation, just add good drug, and we'll take care of the rest. And so we've used our registry to recruit those clinical trials. We've used our natural history database to inform clinical trial design and selection of subjects and so forth. And now to cut to the real chase, we've got almost 20 years of that progression data, as Annie rightly described it, that's been used by all of our pharma partners. Most recently, when we put all those data into this Rare Disease Cures Accelerator data and analytics platform that the FDA is funding, we can give access to all those industry partners to look at those data, not only to design their clinical trials, but guess what? When they had their clinical trial and there was some positive data from those clinical trials, they could use, we think for the first time, they were able to use those natural history data as an external control to provide what's called confirmatory evidence of one clinical trial that was adequate and well controlled and had sufficient confirmatory evidence. FDA guidance over the last 5 years now has indicated that you don't need to do more than one clinical trial. If you're a rare disease with a lot of unmet medical need, we certainly qualified for that, and you have confirmatory evidence to support the otherwise positive data from that single clinical trial.
I just want to pause you again. So just remember that what we have been pushing for in the rare disease community for a very long time was that the rigor around regulatory review and approval remain the same standard in rare disease as in all diseases, but that there be an understanding of the urgency and the need for a tailored approach to rare disease therapy development because of the severity of rare disease, because of the size of our populations, and because of the rapid speed at which rare diseases progress. And so what Ron's speaking to is that FDA had responded, and there was guidance saying that when you have strong enough data, when there is evidence, we don't need 2 trials that demonstrate, so you don't have to reproduce those findings in 2 different trials.
That's so hard to do in a small population.
And in a rare disease, that means a generation of patients, right? We don't have 10 more years to wait to do another study. And so what the Friedreich's ataxia community did yesterday is what?
Well, what we're celebrating yesterday was that this was a win-win-win-win. Certainly a win for the FA community because we got our first approved treatment yesterday. And I didn't break down until I said that. So it's definitely a win for our patients. It's definitely a win for the rare disease community, for all of you, because as Annie has just illustrated, we've been working with the FDA long and hard to try to break into that guidance that says we will be flexible. When you have a rare disease with unmet medical need, you can apply for approval based on a single, adequate, well-controlled study with confirmatory evidence. Subsequent guidance says, here's what you can use for confirmatory evidence. One of the 4 illustrations was natural history data if it's robust and reliable. And what we've worked for 20 years on is providing our industry partners with reliable, robust clinical or natural history data.
Natural history data that FARA had supported and created, and the Friedreich's ataxia community contributed to for 20 years.
And our wonderful partners, like Annie at Muscular Dystrophy Association, 20 years ago, helped us get started. At any rate, the net result was the company, Reata Pharmaceuticals, out of the Dallas area, was able to, they submitted their new drug application last March, almost a full year ago. And after having meetings in which the FDA reviewers were saying, oh, the clinical trial data is not sufficiently persuasive. We're going to need something. Initially, they said, you're going to need another trial. And we really went to bat with Reata and convinced the FDA that, no, these clinical trial data were sufficiently persuasive for all of our clinicians and all of our patients. And so we encouraged Reata to submit their new drug application on that basis, and the FDA to review it promptly. They announced to Reata that they would receive their new drug application and review it. They wouldn't get a complete response letter. They would review it. Then last summer, Reata had looked at our natural history database and had looked at their open label extension over 3 years and selected a cohort from our natural history study, 137 patients very closely matched with the 137 patients in the open label extension, and that showed that those people on drug in the open label extension enjoyed about a 55% reduction in progression over those 3 years. And we said, and the FDA ended up agreeing, that that's a pretty darn good definition of clinically beneficial. 55% slowing in progression, which gives these young patients another couple of years with a higher quality of life, with ambulatory capabilities, while the gene therapies and the protein replacement strategies can kick in. So we were just thrilled to know that the hard work we'd done for 20 years in building that natural history database was sufficient to convince the FDA reviewers, and just have tremendous respect for them in this regard, that this benefit was clinically meaningful, and they gave us the very first approved treatment for our disease yesterday afternoon, about 10 minutes before close of business on our PDUFA date. And so, just to finish that thought, so clear win for the FA community, clear win for the rare disease community, clear win for our industry partners, because they see now that there's this additional regulatory pathway that's been traveled and demonstrated by the FDA to be valid. And finally, it's a win for the FDA, because they've had draft guidance out since 1997, going to this single, adequate, well-controlled study with a confirmatory evidence, and back to the last 3 years of additional guidance saying you can use natural history as confirmatory evidence. They found a way to demonstrate that and manifest that flexibility by giving us this. So now it's good news for them, it's good news for the industry partners, good news for a whole rare disease community, and certainly good news for our community. So thank you. You're the best, girl. Love you.
So I'm gonna tie this back to our asks for just a moment. So what we need tomorrow to make sure that every community is celebrating, just like the Friedreich's ataxia community, is we need more resources for our federal agency partners,
Yes.
because natural history studies are extraordinarily expensive. And as Ron just said, Part of this, a lot of this funding came directly from FARA, funding came from NDA, but funding came from FDA's Office of Orphan Products. The Orphan Products Grants Program helped provide funding. So one of those asks is a testament to the success of this program, the success of this approval.
I can't help but elaborate on that for 30 seconds and say that, yes, they are listening. I'll not forget that I think it was in 2016 that the Office of Orphan Product Development came up with the idea of having a grant program to support natural history studies. They called us. It was Gayatri Rao called us and had the FARA leadership team come in and help her and her team understand how we had done our natural history study, what we would recommend as things they should pay attention to in that grant program. And we spent an afternoon with them telling them how we had done it and what we would recommend. Within a few months, they published the Office of Orphan Product Development grant program for natural history. It wasn't too much longer before our clinicians got an award of one of those natural history grants to do pediatric studies. We had good natural history data of our older, even teenagers, but we didn't have any substantial natural history data on the younger kids. So this grant, our clinicians just finished it last year, and it will be prominently utilized when Reata does its pediatric study in Friedreich's ataxia of their drug that's just been approved for 16 years old and older. We want to drive that down to 2 years old. And that database that the Office of Orphan Product Development funded is going to help do that. So we're just really appreciative of it.
And then the other thing is we need Congress to send this letter to establish the FDA task force so that we can ensure that we have consistency and predictability. Because as Ron said, we've had guidance that has enabled this for a very long time, and we want to make sure that there is a predictable and a robust and sustainable environment for all of our rare disease communities so that we all will have celebratory victories like our Friedreich's ataxia partners.
Should we just quickly note the NCATS?
And NCATS funding, sorry. We have we want all the resources for our rare partners, but NCATS is also one of our funding asks for
They're the home of rare diseases at the NIH.
So let's hear it for our Friedreich's partners and our rare community. And thank you for our interruption in the program today. Please see Ron if you have additional questions.
Love you, girl. You are the very best.